For a closer look at where the Breonna Taylor case stands, earlier tonight I spoke with three experts on justice and policing. Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby, Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, professor at Columbia and UCLA Law Schools, and Dr. Phillip Goff, co-founder and CEO of the Center for Policing Equity. Thank you all for joining us. The FBI is still investigating this case despite the grand jury indictment. Kimberly, what other ways can the officers be charged criminally?
Well, the only option really is the FBI investigation for civil rights violation, which is a criminal charge. But I have to tell you, even in the best situation with an administration that has shown its interest in protecting African Americans and other people against police brutality, it's a tough charge to make. And then in this particular administration, it's almost impossible, to imagine that there's going to be another step. I think this is a case that shows the traditional mechanisms for holding police accountable in this circumstance just did not work.
Dr. Goff, is there a path to justice for Breonna Taylor's family despite what happened yesterday with the grand jury?
Bluntly, no. And that's because Breonna Taylor is dead. You cannot get justice once someone has been taken off this earth. The best you can hope for is accountability. We can have a wholesale reimagining of what's possible in public safety, because I think for too many people in the streets last night and for the 100 days plus that we've had, the system's working exactly the way it's supposed to. And that's the thing that's inspiring change.
Do you see any indications that that's going to happen anytime soon based on what's happened in Kentucky?
It doesn't look like it's going to happen at the state level, but if people insist on it, either electorally or through whatever other means of organizing are in front of them, yes, it is possible. And I will say that the American populace is way more activated to this issue than I have ever seen it in my lifetime.
Kimberly, to that point, there are people across the country who are upset by the lack of charges against the three officers. Do you think these officers should have been charged with manslaughter or murder?
Oh, I absolutely think that they should have and that they could have. And I think that the selective credibility that the AG gave to one witness as opposed to nearly a dozen others who said that they did not hear the police announce themselves shows us that there is subjectivity involved in evaluating the evidence. I mean, we're not going to know for certain what the grand jury was presented with until and unless it's released.
Marilyn, 5 years ago, you prosecuted police officers in Baltimore in the Freddie Gray case. None of them were convicted. Can you speak to how hard it is to get a conviction against law enforcement? And do you understand the frustration that so many people are feeling today?
So I can truly speak to the frustration of so many people and Americans in this country right now, especially for Black people in this country. We only know, honestly, what injustice looks like. And the refusal to see our humanity based upon the color of our skin is something that we cannot and will not any longer accept. The law is what it is, but it's subject to interpretation. And you cannot underestimate the power and the discretion of the local prosecutor. And that's what we saw here today, right? The charging police is difficult. It's something that's going to come with being mocked and ridiculed and harassed and hate mail and death threat. I was personally sued, but you cannot tell me. We take an obligation to apply justice over convictions. And what you cannot tell me is that this one standard of justice was applied in this particular case.
So I think to the average layperson, you would think if the prosecutor in this case thought due process was necessary to let this run its course, that he could have brought some charges of some sort. Yes? No?
I mean, you're absolutely right, Byron. I mean, as always the case, the grand jury is led by the prosecutor. You have to ask what evidence this particular prosecutor put before the grand jury.
Now, the prosecutor said that he presented what the law allowed him to do. It seems like you're making the argument that if he wanted an indictment, he could have gotten an indictment.
As a prosecutor, it's one-sided, right? And so you put forth the evidence that you want the jury, the grand jury, to consider to lodge the charges that you want to exist. And if you don't want those charges to exist, then guess what? You throw it in front of the grand jury and you throw your hands up and you say, oh, well, guess what? It's not on me. It's on the grand jury. They decided not to bring charges. It's a no bill on this one.
There have been endless cries for reform. The Louisville Police Department implemented changes, but Louisville is just one police force in a huge country. What else needs to happen?
Well, I think one of the most important things that needs to be grappled with is this is not a new problem. We have to understand that Black people in particular have been policed since we came to these shores, since we were brought here. We have to understand that the policing that Black women have experienced specifically has often been in their homes. For Black women, there is really no place of safety. And the last thing I think that is so important to recognize is that to really understand this vulnerability, we got to pull the lens back. We've got to look at structural dimensions. We have to look at the history of racial inequality. And so we've got to really recognize that this is an attack on our bodies and our ideas. And the real tragedy here is not just that the officers weren't charged with anything. The real challenge is that Breonna Taylor was killed in the first place.
Thank you all again for your time and your expertise. And sadly, I would imagine we will have this conversation again.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.